Yes, in some ways, I certainly consider myself a Buddhist. I still practice meditation, and I'm still part of Tibetan Buddhist communities. Um, and then in some ways, I think, uh, the Buddha himself, in many of his teachings, which although they weren't written down until hundreds of years after he lived, but what he's written to said was that he wasn't really looking for followers, and a lot of the teachings invite us to trust our own experience. Like one of the famous phrases that he said was, you should test all my words like it was gold. You bite it and heat it up, and that's how we are asked to engage with the teachings. And so, right, in some ways, I don't consider myself a Buddhist because it's really, an individual practice and pursuit. Yeah, so both and.
Just if you want to just kind of summarize your experience just a little bit, and what that meant to you or how that changed your experience.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I had the good fortune to get to spend 5 months. I was mostly in India, in Bodh Gaya, which is the place where the Buddha is said to have attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And because that is such a holy place, it's really become a hub for Buddhists around the world. So I stayed at the Burmese Vihar in Bodh Gaya, which was started by Buddhists from Burma, which is now called Myanmar. And there were a number of monastics who lived there full time and took care of the shrine that was there. And they had also really created a lot of living space. And they welcomed pilgrims from various traditions. So, in my time there were also Tibetan monks who passed through, and people from Thailand, and in the Burmese tradition also, they have a tradition of lay ordination. So when people go on pilgrimage, oftentimes they will ordain as a monk for a short period of time, like a month or something like that. And that was something that I had the opportunity to do while I was there. They encouraged us to do that. And so I ordained as a Burmese monk, in the Theravada tradition for 2 weeks while I was there, and, held the various precepts that are required of a monastic. So, and what I learned a lot from that experience myself. Just that there is, it's almost like a powerful technology, right? In the sense that there's all of these guidelines that can really help with our spiritual practice. And then I also learned a lot from the monks that I was around. The abbot of that monastery was a really amazing person, and he really gave off just this total sense of peace and calm and compassion. He would go around every morning and put his hand on all of his trees that were in the compound and pray for them. And then he would sit and talk to anybody who wanted to talk with him. And so just being around someone who really embodied the values that I was trying to embody was helpful. Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there are definitely different views on this. I, definitely don't speak for every Buddhist, but what comes to mind when you ask is in one of the Buddha's very early teachings, he talked about the Four Noble Truths, right? And the first of those is that it's often translated as life is suffering. But I think, that doesn't sound so great. And what I think he was really trying to say is that there is kind of an inherent unsatisfactoriness in the way most of us live our lives, right? We try to hold on to things, and we try to, push things that we don't like away, and that is painful. And, he also said, right, and reminded us that we're all going to get sick and age and die. And that's a guarantee. So there is, in some way, something to achieve salvation from, and it's that suffering that I think we all know. But then what he said is that, there's a way out of suffering, right? And that is to work with, right, the causes of suffering, which, right, attachment or clinging, aversion or hatred, and ignorance or delusion. And by doing various meditation practices and engaging in right conduct, how we are in our lives, and also having the right view of the situation, all of those things can come together to give freedom from suffering, right? So I think, yes, in some ways there is salvation, and it's salvation from suffering. Yeah, I again feel that I have been fortunate not to encounter many of those obstacles. I think that probably is in large part just based on where I have lived in my life. Most of the communities and towns that I've lived in are pretty accommodating to diverse beliefs. I don't know that that's true everywhere, but I've found in my life that, people are respectful and, allow me to practice and yeah, absolutely. There is the 5 precepts, which, I have taken, which are to avoid killing, right? The taking of a life, stealing, the taking of things which are not ours, sexual misconduct, and right, the taking of someone else's body that is not ours, and right speech, so not lying, and did I hit all 5? Killing, stealing, lying, sexual misconduct, and avoiding intoxicants.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, so substances that cloud the mind. Yeah, so in some traditions, there is a belief that women cannot obtain enlightenment, right? The fruit of the path of Buddhism, and that it's only when someone is reincarnated in a male body that enlightenment is achievable.
Okay.
I don't know that everyone would agree with that, but that is in the suttas, or the scripture of Buddhism. And there's also for monastics, right, monks are able to take more vows than nuns are, and that's like taking full ordination is only available to monks, and there is a movement right now to change that within Tibetan Buddhism. So There's two examples.
Great.
Yeah. Well, in Tibetan Buddhism, right, the school that I was brought up in, there is a text which is considered, authoritative. The Buddha never really went into too much detail of what he meant when he said to avoid sexual misconduct. And so I think it was, later on, more than 1,000 years after the Buddha lived, someone in Tibet wrote a commentary, right, saying that to engage in, sexual acts with the same-sex partner is, sexual misconduct, and that would potentially be, breaking a vow that someone had taken. Now, in early Buddhism, it was really geared towards monastics. They're not allowed to engage in any sexual activity at all. And I think it's worth noting that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who is in many ways the spiritual leader in Tibetan Buddhism, has responded to this question about same-sex partners. And
okay, my last question here will be regarding any obstacles that you feel someone following the Buddhist religion may come across, and any other thoughts you might want to add on the topic.
Yeah, I think that in America, generally speaking, Buddhism is fairly accepted, and I'm sure there's places where that's not the case, but right, and it's kind of made its way into our culture in a lot of ways, right? The word like mindfulness, wasn't used really before the 50s, and now it's made its way into our everyday language. That said, I think, right, people right now, there's a real surge and during COVID, there was a real surge in violence against Asian Americans and people visiting from Asian countries, and right, many of those people are potentially practicing Buddhism. And I think also potentially there's an assumption that if someone is from an Asian country, that they're practicing Buddhism, which is not necessarily the case. So I think that violence, on the basis of what someone looks like, maybe more so than their religious values, is an obstacle to being able to prosper and live peacefully and practice one's religion. Well, the only thing that I would want to add is that I feel that there's lessons that we can all learn from all of the faith and wisdom traditions in the world. And I would encourage people to, I think there is a lot of wisdom within Buddhism that whether, you don't have to be a Buddhist to benefit from that, right? There's some practical advice that comes from, this path that is potentially more widely applicable. So I would say that, and that I owe a lot to this, tradition that has, come from very far away. And I just feel really grateful that I've had the chance to engage, with Buddhism, that it was brought here. So I'm thankful to, all those people who have come before, the lineage, right, who have passed these teachings down from person to person for thousands of years to me. So thanks to those people.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sharing.
You're very welcome. It's great to be here.